I still remember the first time Liv told me, "I don't owe you sex. I'm not your property." The words cut through me like a blade, but perhaps the worst part was that I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there, yet I had ignored them, hoping that things would change. Our marriage had not always been like this. There was a time when Liv and I were passionate, when we would steal moments from our busy lives just to be together. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. It started with small things: a tired sigh when I initiated, a request to postpone intimacy until later. At first, I understood. Life was stressful. We had jobs, responsibilities, children to raise. It made sense that she would be tired sometimes. But sometimes slowly became most times, and before long it felt like all the time. I tried to be patient. I tried to be the understanding husband who supported his wife through the ups and downs of life. I took on more chores around the house, helped with the kids, even adjusted my schedule to make things easier for her. I thought that if I lessened her burden, she would feel more relaxed and intimacy would return naturally. But it didn't. Instead, Liv put up more barriers. She started making rules, as if our marriage was some kind of business arrangement that required scheduling and guidelines. Monday and Tuesday were off limits because of her part-time job. Friday was her time to unwind, so no sex then either. Sunday was a religious day. Another day ruled out. I realized, with growing frustration, that the only times we were intimate were special occasions. My birthday, or if I had done something remarkable for her. It felt less like making love and more like I was being rewarded for good behavior. I struggled with my frustration in silence for a while. I told myself that it was temporary, that maybe she just needed time. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and nothing changed. I started resenting the excuses, the constant denial, the lack of effort on her part. It wasn't just about sex. It was about the emotional distance, the sense that I was no longer a priority in her life. I felt invisible in my own marriage. One evening, after another failed attempt at intimacy, I finally snapped. "Liv, this isn't normal. We're married. We should want to be with each other." She barely looked up from her book. "I'm just not in the mood, Richard." "You're never in the mood," I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Do you even want to be married to me anymore?" That's when she turned to me, her face calm, but her eyes hard. "I don't owe you sex. I'm not your property." It was like a slap to the face. I stared at her, trying to process her words. Of course, she wasn't my property. Of course, I didn't think she owed me sex as some kind of transaction. But wasn't intimacy a fundamental part of marriage? Wasn't it something we were supposed to want to share with each other? I felt the anger rise in me, but more than that, I felt something else: defeat. I had spent so much time trying to make things easier for her, thinking that my efforts would make her more willing to be close to me. But now, I realized the truth. It wasn't about stress. It wasn't about being tired. She simply didn't want me anymore. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Liv scrolled on her phone beside me, completely detached. The silence between us had grown so thick, so oppressive, that it felt like an invisible wall. The woman I had married, the woman I had once adored, was now a stranger. The connection we once had was gone, reduced to routine conversations about bills, schedules, and chores. There was no laughter, no playfulness, no warmth. I found myself replaying memories in my head. The way she used to rest her head on my chest after a long day, how she once whispered my name with affection. Those moments felt like a lifetime ago. The next day, I tried one last time. I brought home her favorite flowers, cooked dinner, and set up a quiet evening for just the two of us. I wanted to remind her of what we had, of the love that once burned between us. She barely acknowledged it. A half-hearted thanks and a distracted glance at her phone. That was it. "Liv, can we talk?" I finally said. frustration bubbling up. She sighed, clearly uninterested. About what, Richard? About us. About what's happening to our marriage. Nothing is happening, she replied, standing up to put her plate in the sink. We're just busy, tired. You always overthink these things. Overthink? Liv, we haven't been intimate in months. We barely even talk anymore. You treat me like a roommate, not a husband. She rolled her eyes. Oh, so this is about sex again? It's about intimacy, about connection, about feeling like I matter to you. Do I? For a moment, she said nothing. Then she shrugged. I don't see what the big deal is. It's not like we're fighting or anything. That was the moment it truly hit me. She didn't care. She had completely checked out of our marriage, and I was the only one fighting to keep it alive. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the lump in my throat. Liv, you don't even try anymore. You act like I should just accept this, like I have no right to want more. But I do. I deserve more. She scoffed. So what, Richard? You're going to leave me just because of this? Because I'm not in the mood? Because I'm not throwing myself at you? No, I said quietly, because you don't love me anymore. She didn't respond. She just stood there, arms crossed, unwilling to meet my eyes. And that was answer enough. I didn't respond to Liv that night. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't turn into an argument, so I just turned over and stared at the ceiling, wondering how we got here. The next morning, I made a decision. If Liv wasn't willing to put in effort, then neither was I. I stopped doing the things I used to do to make her life easier. I no longer woke up early to help get the kids ready for school. I didn't wash the dishes after dinner. I stopped picking up groceries on my way home from work. If Liv wanted to act like our marriage was just a cohabitation arrangement where I was merely a provider and nothing more, then I would treat it as such. At first, she didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she didn't comment on it. But after a few days, she confronted me. Why are you not helping out anymore? She asked, frustration evident in her voice. I looked at her and said the words I had been holding in for days. I don't owe you any effort. I'm not your property. The look on her face was one of pure shock. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it, processing my words. She had used that very line on me, yet somehow, when it was turned back on her, she didn't like how it felt. An argument erupted that night. Liv accused me of being childish, of punishing her for setting boundaries. I told her it wasn't about punishment, it was about fairness. If she could set boundaries around intimacy, then I could set boundaries around my efforts. She couldn't expect me to keep giving when she refused to meet me halfway. The tension in our home became unbearable. The air was thick with unspoken resentment. Meals were quiet, filled only with the clinking of utensils against plates. Conversations became minimal, consisting of only the essentials. Who was picking up the kids? Did we need more milk? Are you working late today? I noticed the way Liv began watching me, almost as if trying to gauge how serious I was about my withdrawal. She probably assumed I was throwing a temporary tantrum, that I would snap out of it soon enough. But I wasn't playing a game. I had spent years compromising, adjusting, and bending over backward to accommodate her needs. Now, I was finally putting myself first. Days passed, then weeks. Liv began to realize that I wasn't just making a point. I was changing the way I operated in this marriage, and she didn't like it. One evening, after another silent dinner, she finally cracked. Richard, this isn't how a marriage works, she said, setting her fork down forcefully. I scoffed, leaning back in my chair. You think I don't know that? Then why are you acting like this? She snapped. Withholding effort out of spite? That's not a solution. I sighed. It's not about spite, Liv. It's about balance. I spent years trying to make things easier for you, thinking that if I did my part and then some, you would see the effort and reciprocate. But you never did. You only pulled further away. So now I'm done being the only one trying. She shook her head. That's not fair. I let out a bitter chuckle. Neither is a marriage where one person gives everything and gets nothing in return. She went silent, and I could see the frustration building in her. She hated that I wasn't backing down. She hated that, for once, I was standing my ground. That night, we slept with our backs to each other, an invisible wall of resentment between us. The house felt colder. The bed felt lonelier. And yet, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. As the days stretched on, Liv started making small attempts to bridge the gap. She began doing things I once handled without complaint, waking up earlier to help with the kids, washing the dishes after dinner, even taking on a few extra errands. It was clear she thought this was a temporary standoff that could be resolved by shifting responsibilities, but she still didn't grasp the real issue. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Is this what you wanted? To see me struggle? To make me realize how much you did?" I turned to face her. "I never wanted to see you struggle, Liv. I just wanted us to be a team. But you never saw me as your partner, just a provider, a convenience." Her face twisted in frustration. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Tell me, Liv, when was the last time you put effort into making me feel wanted? Into making me feel like more than just a paycheck and a helping hand?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. And in that silence, I had my answer. It wasn't just that she didn't want to put in the effort, she never even realized she had to. That realization hurt more than all the rejections combined. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. I had spent so long trying to hold on to our marriage, but now I could feel it slipping through my fingers. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to stop it. For days, I wrestled with the decision in my mind. Divorce wasn't something I had ever imagined for us. I had made vows. I had promised to stand by her through everything. But how do you stay in a marriage where you feel unwanted? How do you keep trying when your partner refuses to even meet you halfway? I started noticing things I had ignored before. The way she barely touched me anymore. The way she only spoke to me about responsibilities and schedules, never about us. I was a roommate to her, not a husband. And that wasn't the kind of marriage I wanted to be in. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat down across from her at the dining table. "I want a divorce," I said simply. Liv's eyes widened in shock. "Richard, don't be ridiculous. Just because you're not getting what you want doesn't mean—" "It's not just about sex, Liv," I interrupted. "It's about the fact that you don't even see me as your husband anymore." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in a long time, she looked uncertain. But for me, the decision had already been made. And for the first time in years, I felt free.